as always, a very warm welcome to this week's Life Issues. Now, I think becoming a dad was one of the scariest and most rewarding things I've ever done. Because the awareness of the endless opportunities to fall short, to let our children down, to get it wrong, that awareness, it kind of hangs like the sword of Damocles over the awareness of most dads, doesn't it? We had 4 lads, and they're all grown up now with children of their own. And I'm pleased to say, bumps on the road notwithstanding, they have grown into men that I am proud to be associated with, and hopefully they would say the same about their dad. Of course, my insecurities tell me that they have turned out as well as they have. Well, that's more to do with their mum than it is with me. So what makes a good dad? I mean, no dad is perfect, are they? And throughout history, there have been plenty of examples of bad dads. I mean, Henry VIII, for example, if you go around chopping off mum's head, it's not going to endear you to your children. Or in the Bible, you've got to wonder what was going on in Lot's head when he was willing to give his daughters to the mob. So what makes a good dad? Why is a positive father role important? And in an age when absentee dads are a problem for many, and in the media very often dads are portrayed as bumbling Homer Simpson or daddy pig cliches, have we, in allowing that, contributed to the appeal of toxic masculinity to young men? Jesus said, when you pray, pray like this, our Father. So he obviously thought it was a role that was worth lauding and attributing to God. Is it time for us to reclaim that and proclaim the truth that while poor dad roles do much damage, and let's not hide from that, most dads are doing a good, if often winging it job, and it's time to celebrate that as we see the divine creator in creation, we also see the heart of our Father in the role of dad. This week on Life Issues, we're asking, why do dads matter? And how can we be the best a child can get? Andy Lamberton is the Legacy Director at Exodus. Legacyfathers.org is the website. And Nate Morgan-Locke is the Creative Director at Speak Life, speaklife.org.uk. They are my guests to explore the role of dads. And the truth is, Andy, being a dad, it is a tough and daunting job, isn't it?
Yeah, and fair play to you for having 4 sons. That's fantastic. We have 4 children as well, and another one on the way. We've got boy, girl, and a little boy on the way. And you're right. I think we can all relate to the first time we hold a baby, or the first time that you take that child out of the hospital, and the nurses just let you go, and you feel like, am I allowed to just walk out here with this child? And I think of Samson had a dad. Samson in Scripture, his name is Manoah, and whenever he hears that he's going to have a child, he actually asks, Lord, could you send that angel back and teach me how to raise this child? Mm-hmm. And I think we can all relate to that. We see the potential in our children, and we just think, could I please have some heavenly parenting advice as to how to unfold and introduce this child to the world with all the dangers and opportunities and potential and pitfalls that would be going on and keep you up at night or get you up early in the morning, depending on how you're feeling.
Yeah, because it is a scary thing, Nate, and the opportunity, the potential to get it wrong, it does play to our insecurities, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I think I know that exact experience of first time I held our firstborn, and just this absolute flood of fear, anxiety, excitement. Everything was going on. I don't think I've ever felt more alive than in that moment. But yeah, I was just terrified. What does it look like to be a good dad? And whether you've had a good dad yourself, I think we all feel that pressure instantly. And yeah, there's a great point that Manoah asks for divine wisdom, an angel to come down and walk him through the process. So yeah, I could do with one of those as well.
The thing is, we don't actually talk about it, though, do we? Because, I mean, there's the three of us saying exactly the same thing, but how often do we actually hear dads say to one another, hey, it's scary being a dad, isn't it? Because somehow we feel everybody else is managing it and we need to be, faking it till we make it as well. What are the sort of things do you think? And Andy, if we start with you, what's the sort of things that dads are afraid of when it comes to their role as a dad?
I think for me as a dad, I'm scared of just having good intentions and kind of just leaving it at that I want to be a good dad. I think every dad is wired that way. Any dad I ever speak to, they just all they want is what's best for their children. And we all know, looking at the mirror or reviewing our lives, sometimes when you write down what you've did that day, you think, I'm not the man that I want to be or whatever. And the world doesn't need perfect fathers, because that's not the gospel. We're forgiven people. We're not perfect people. And I think if I think about what am I worried about as a dad, I'm worried about just staying in good intentions and not, in a sense, becoming intentional, if you like. But I'm also worried about maybe becoming intense if that intentionality gets too extreme. And what if I turn my children off faith, or what if I'm too much of an intense dad? So it's getting that balance. And it's just, I think for a lot of dads, it's busyness too. We want to spend time with our kids, but the pressures at work, and for a lot of us after the commute, if we've got young kids, we might be just touching base at home, kind of tucking them into bed, and then we're up early again the next morning. And we worry that time is passing us by and we're missing our opportunities.
Yeah, I resonate strongly with that, about the time passing you by and the speed with which your children seem to go through these different sort of stages of developmental maturity. I always think I'm a really good dad at parenting my children from a year ago, or when they were really little. It was 2 months ago. I knew what to do at this stage. But that stage is gone now, so I've got to re-update the system and work out what it looks like to lead them, guide them, and it's such a significant thing. And I do think there's a difference between mums and dads in this, that for mums, I'm told they feel much more maternal at the moment they get pregnant. As soon as they know they're pregnant, it all sort of kicks in, and obviously their bodies kind of change to look after the baby. But for dads, it doesn't tend to be until the baby's born that even if you feel kicks when they're in the womb and things. But also mums typically have those opportunities to kind of share with other mums, toddler groups and things. Of course, dads are allowed to go, but they're quite female heavy, shall we say. So yeah, that opportunity to talk as fathers and to share the challenges and to share advice really is quite a difficult one to come by, I think.
And in a world where, and we'll cycle back to this again later on, but in a world where we've got all the pressures around things like toxic masculinity, but also other social media pressures that are on our children, expectations that are put on us through social media and society expectations and so on. I mean, it's not just the sort of anxiety of getting it wrong. I mean, the complexity of the things that you have to manage to try and address in your lives of your children. It's a hard path to navigate.
Mm-hmm. And I think typically because the particular challenges they're facing in terms of what technology is like, what social media is like, they're not the same as we experienced when we were their age for our children. And so that sense that you sort of groping around in the dark, how do I give my children good advice and good instruction and guidance in navigating that when I don't have much experience of it myself? And I think as dads, we like to know how to do things. It's one of talk about mansplaining, but it's just men like to know stuff and they like to share what they know. And so the tricky thing when your children come to you and say, or you become aware of these issues that children are facing today, particularly the adolescents are facing, that you think, well, how do I start to navigate that when life was very, very different when I was a teenager?
Yeah, I think we all worry that people who figured out algorithms might have more influence on the next generation than people who figured out life, you know?
Yeah.
And whenever I speak with dads and talk to other fathers, the world is in a hyper changing place. But the reality is, whenever things are changing really quickly, I think young people need to know what's not going to change. And a father, a mother, older people in a church, we have the opportunity to put the word always in a sentence and say it to our children. So we can say, I will always love you. I will always be here for you. You can always speak to me about anything. There's very few people actually, you know, I've been in youth ministry for a long time. And the amount of time you have to spend with a young person before you can say, you know, I will always be here for you, and they believe you. I mean, it's just massive. Whereas a parent, a father, for today's topic, automatically has that right and can put that word in there, can give them a foundation on which to live their lives. And so while there's a lot of complexities, I just want to really encourage all the fathers that are listening. You're probably doing way better than you think you are. And there's a lot of very simple things like saying that you love your children, like saying that you'll be there for them. That, you know, if you're a 6 out of 10 and all of those things, you're probably doing a good job.
And I think that's an important point that you make, because there is a danger that we over catastrophize our failings and don't see the positives that we are able to contribute. I mean, there's a balance, isn't there, between finding a good worry in that we need to have a bit of concern and worry about, you know, how we're going to do and what's going to happen to our children, where the future's going to take them. That's a valid thing for us to carry. But how do we find the balance, Nate, between that and, like I said, catastrophizing everything, that it's all, the world's going to burn down around us because we're going to fall short?
Yeah, no, I think sometimes I'm tempted to just focus on the first half of that verse that Paul writes to, is it the Ephesians? No, maybe it's the Colossians. Fathers, do not exasperate your children, but bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. And that if I'm only focused on that first half, do not exasperate your children. Well, am I being too hard? Am I being too soft? You know, like, am I getting this right? Am I getting that right? I'll probably exasperate everyone if I'm focused on that. But the training and instruction of the Lord is the alternative. That's the way we don't exasperate them. And so, just as Andy was saying, the sense that God is Father, Son, and Spirit, so that the role of father doesn't sort of only go back to my dad or granddad. It goes all the way back to the heart of heaven, and the Lord, the Father, has spoken through his Son, and so we have wisdom. We have the Word of God given to us, and for us as Christians, that has to be our guide when we're considering these things.
Andy, tell us a little bit about Legacy Fathers. What is it you're trying to do with that?
I've grown up as a farmer. And then about 10 years ago, moved into vocational youth ministry. I was doing youth ministry kind of on a part-time basis. I give the cows a day off on a Friday and went into local schools. But over that 16 years, I guess one of my main observations is that we live in an under-fathered society. And I really want to help fathers speak. So I'm not coming... Legacy didn't start thinking we've got fatherhood figured out. Let's share it all. It's actually come from a place of we see the difference an engaged father makes in the life of a young person. So let's help fathers, all parents. Let's help grandfathers. Let's help them speak gospel truth to the next generation. So at Legacy, we've got like a series of programs. Some of them just dad comes. So we've got a series called Men Behaving Dadly, for example. Or for some of them, then the child comes as well. And we focus on that 11 to 14 age group, kind of just before they come into the teenage years. What kind of foundations do you want to set at those ones? So we've got one called the Legacy Award, for example, which is like a Christian Duke of Ed that you do with your dad, if you can imagine that.
Mm-hmm. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's good fun. We're on our second pilot at the minute, and I'm actually doing it with my son this time. It's my first legacy program to do as a dad rather than the facilitator, and it's a real blessing. Yeah,
and it'll seem very different, I'm sure, doing it from that side, because the thing that I picked up on was you talk about being underfathered. The truth is that absentee dads, or dads who are maybe present in the home but not very present in their children's lives, is a real issue. And although dads have the right to say, I'll always be there for you, truth is, for a lot of children, it's a tenuous, maybe part-time relationship at best that they have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's true. Across the UK, it's a fifth of homes have no father figure present at all. And it's actually quite close to half that will grow up without a consistent father figure. So that's where the dad is out of the picture for some part of their lives. So, I mean, that's across the board. And then yet we look at the difference that a dad makes in a life, and it's just amazing. And of course, the difference a mum makes, and that phrase of it takes a village to raise a child. I think that's certainly true. And, we want to hero on single parents, and we're just so proud of them in their lives. And we want to help those who don't have a father in their life. And I think the church is such a unique place for children and young people to engage with people of a more senior generation in a way that's encouraging.
Yeah. Now, you talk in the courses that you do about building the character, courage, and compassion of their sons. Just unpack that thought for us. What is it you're trying to do with that?
Yeah, so this is for the Legacy Award, actually, the program I just mentioned. So there's two ways to look at that. One is, how do we help fathers invest in their sons, and daughters as well can do the Legacy Award? How do we help them invest at this key milestone in their life just before they enter into the teenage years? But the other way of looking at that is, how do we help children and young people rise up into adulthood? And as a church, rise up into Christian adulthood. What does that look like? And Paul, I have to say, normally whenever you start something as a ministry, there's another ministry that's doing something very similar, and you kind of copy it but put your own slant on it. That's kind of the way. You see something, it looks really good, and then you think, right, how could we do that here? And as I have tried to develop a program that helps children move from childhood into adolescence into adulthood, I've found very little ministries or churches that are looking at this. And yet in our society, it's such a need. I mean, we just send our kids to university and cross our fingers sometimes. So the 3 C's that you mentioned there, the 3 values that run through the Legacy Award. So we've got courage, compassion, and character. And maybe just to run through those. So courage, one of the truths that you have to face as you grow up is that life is hard. Life is easy for a child. And if you, like boys, do easy things of little consequence. But as we become men, we realize that we can achieve difficult things that make a real difference. And this takes courage to do what's right, even when it's hard. Compassion, as we grow up, we realize that life's not about you. Boys live for themselves. As soon as we're out of the room, we're crying, we want things. But as we become men, we realize that other people matter, and we develop our ability to love. We become protectors and providers. We become givers, not takers. And this takes compassion to live for others, even when it doesn't benefit you. And then the last C that we look at is character. And life will one day be over. That's another reality we have to face. And boys, in a sense, children don't consider their lives as a whole. But as we become men, we realize that our lives are part of something much larger. And we can make a significant contribution to society in the time that we have. We move from having a kind of a temporary mindset, like a child wants ice cream for dinner, to having a more long-term, or from a Christian perspective, having an eternal mindset. And this takes character to hold on to the values that matter, even when we might not see the short-term results. So throughout, the Legacy Award is a 6-month journey. We call it a 6-month adventure of discipleship between father and their 11 to 14-year-old. For the courage one, we do an overnight of courage where the young people have to navigate up a mountain themselves, and a bit of swimming involved, and we camp overnight. For compassion, we have a compassion project where they help out. This year, we're helping out at a local food bank, and then they have to raise some money for a charity of their choice. And then for character, we have character workshops where they look at how they are part of God's story, but also part of, their family story. So what does it mean to be part of God's story? But also, what does it mean, for me and my son? What does it mean to be a Lamberton? What does it mean? What story are we planted into?
Which segues nicely into what is your focus, Nate, because those elements that Andy's describing there, I mean, historically, they would have been passed on from father to son, from one generation to another, simply through the telling, the spending of time together, and the telling of stories, and the sharing of sort of the reality of our history that sort of molds and shapes the character of who we are now. And then that gets passed on to the next generation. And I know one of the things that you're keen in what you do. Well, explain to us what you do with Speak Life, but then how does that apply within the context of what we're saying today?
Yeah, so the work I do with Speak Life is as creative director over everything we do is an evangelistic ministry. But the particular focus and training and teaching that I do is on storytelling. So what do we think is makes a story a story? What is the power of storytelling? And so over the years, I've done a few different things. There was a podcast called Popcorn Parenting that I did with a friend of mine called James Carey, and we would go through basically a Pixar films, Disney, DreamWorks stuff, and we just say, if you're going to watch this film with your kid, here's some themes or issues or conversations you can have. But then the channel that I run now, called Reformed Mythologist, is really about taking a Reformed Christian approach to the storytelling arts and how they work. So we have episodes on all things from Black Mirror to Bluey to the latest kind of films that have come out. And I think how it relates to this, exactly as you were just saying, Paul, that what are the stories that your family is based on? What are the stories that are considered to be the best or most accurate depiction of the members of your family? And so I'm always encouraging parents, children, husbands and wives, can you retell the story of how you met, how your family came to be? What was the early childhood story that keeps coming up with one of your children? What are the anecdotes that get shared over and over again? What are the stories about granny and granddad? What are those things? And I genuinely believe that it's stories that build the world, that the Lord has set us into a world that is kind of storyfied. It is kind of, as C.S. Lewis would call it, it's a myth-made world, and we are made or created to respond to story and storytelling. And those can be, real life stories, anecdotes, personal stories, but also the stories we are bombarded with in media, the cultural stories that dominate and tend to drive the conversation. It's largely done through storytelling.
Because that's an important element of all of this, is that if we don't bring our stories, or the stories that share our culture, share our compassion, share our courage, if we don't bring those to our children, then there are other stories. You mentioned some of the ones that are very popular at the moment. they will influence, they will shape them. My grandson was sitting on his phone with me over the weekend. He was watching a video, and the video was of two adults playing a game, and I'm going, I'm not really comfortable with this shaping how you think. So, we address that. But if we are not intentional about that, Andy, then all these influences are going to shape our children. Do we have to be willing to be more forthright and more about sharing our stories and stepping into that space?
Yes. And funny, Nate, as you were speaking, I was thinking, I don't always think of the Bible when people are speaking, but I was thinking of Psalm 78, which it's a favorite of people who, Sunday school teachers, youth leaders, they will love Psalm 78. We will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord. I love it. Whenever I go to the swimming pool, I often choose the locker number 78 because I like the Psalm so much. And I mean, I'm going to start this by saying, do we know the names of our great-grandparents or our great-great-grandparents? The first names? I certainly don't. I mean, we're forgotten within 3-4 generations, even the most basic details of our lives. Yet, I don't know if you've noticed, but Psalm 78 actually gives us a vision of not just one generation, but 5. It says, things our fathers have told us, we will not hide them from their children. We will tell the next generation, there's the famous verse, the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, even children yet to be born, and they in turn will tell their children so that they will put their trust in the Lord. So Nate, there's your commission for being a storyteller. Psalm 78 says, beyond our natural kind of memory, beyond 3, 4, 5, the vision is actually that great-great-grandchildren will put their trust in the Lord because of the stories that are passed on from one generation to the next, the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord.
And of course, we do have in God, we have an example of what it means to be a father. I mean, that moment when God says to Jesus, you are my son, whom I love and with whom I am well pleased. I mean, for any dad who has actually ever been in a position where they've put their arm around the shoulders of their child and gone, I love you and I am proud of you, it is an incredible moment. And that's the imagery around that of what a good father is phenomenal. But you mentioned Bluey. You mentioned a couple of other things as well. I mean, the truth is, I think Bluey's dad actually comes out okay, but there's an awful lot of media representations of dads where we're not really firing all cylinders. We're not really at the top of our game. We're not really the sharpest knife in the box, are we?
Yeah, no, I think one of the my favorite episode of Bluey. Are you familiar with it, Andy? You've seen it, I'm sure.
Oh yes, yeah.
So my kids are well above the age at which typically children are watching Bluey, but they still love it, and often I'll watch it with them. And my favorite episode is one called Fairy Tale, in which Bandit is reading bedtime stories to the two girls. And he then says, I'm going to tell you a real life fairy tale. And it's basically the story of how he met their mum. And there's some question marks at the end when mum comes in to say, did you get all the details right, kind of thing. But it's a beautiful story of how she sort of came to his rescue on some, summer holiday when they were children. And what's beautiful about that is that the girls are then taught by this story. They're taught that they come from a place of love, that their backstory, if you like, their origin story, to put it kind of superhero terms, is a romantic comedy. It's a love story between mum and dad. And that's how you came to be. And I think those sorts of things are so key because that actually expresses something of who I am. I'm the product or the fruit of love. And so for, any, dads just wanted a really kind of practical thing to do off the back of this. sit your kids down, tell them how you met their mother. You know, what's the story there? And there'll be funny parts to that. There'll be sweet parts to that. And that is really teaching us that we come from a place of love. And you take that to a theological level and you say, okay, so where does humanity come from? Well, we come from the love of the Father, the Son, and Spirit. God is love. And so we come from this place of love, and recognizing that and retelling the story of how God expresses that love, exactly as you were saying, Andy, is the work of the church, is the work of the family, to just keep reminding, let's tell that story again. And it's not a boring story, or a single story. It's a story that seems to kind of permeate through so many different stories that the culture tells, even when people aren't trying to tell the Christian story. It's remarkable just how often they end up saying very, very Christian things, because that's the world we live in.
But how much, going back to my question right at the beginning, and I don't mind which of you wants to pick this up, who's prepared to stick their head above the parapet, how much of the way that media represents dads, both to their sons and to their daughters, with the Homer Simpson, with the Daddy Pig. He's not a bad lot, Daddy Pig, but he's not he's not the forceful leader within the family, really, is he? How much of that actually is contributing to the way that the message of toxic masculinity and so on is infiltrating the culture of the next generation?
I think there's at one level, I would want to say that having a little bit of a laugh at dad's expense is actually a remarkably healthy thing for a family to do. So, the things where, dad makes a mistake, or, that time when he, he got something wrong, or like he doesn't know how to do this. Like there's a way in which that's actually very healthy, because it stops dad taking himself too seriously. And for a lot of us, that's our problem. Right?
Yeah, my family are very good at making sure I don't take myself too seriously. Very good at it.
But the issue is, if it's relentless, if it's the only seeming depiction of fatherhood that we have, then what you get in sort of response isn't, oh no, here's a healthy dad who's got a great understanding in these character traits that you were talking about, Andy. We get something that says, no, dad is going to be taken seriously, and being a man is about never being the butt of the joke, and therefore you might end up into some pretty dark places, which from what we're told on social media, there's an awful lot of very, very negative and dark depictions of what it means to be a man, of masculinity, which frankly is has more in common with the demons than with the divine. So I think that's seemingly a bit of a backlash that we've had, as some of this Homer Simpson. I mean, he is clearly a pretty terrible father, as we've had that just drip fed through the culture over the years, that rather than then presenting healthy views of dad, which I think Bluey does, Bandit is a brilliant example of a dad, we get this kind of very taking themselves very seriously and not to be messed with kind of, might is right kind of approach to masculinity.
What do you think, Andy?
Yeah. I just keep getting drawn back, Nate, to the verse you mentioned earlier on, that Ephesians 6, fathers, do not exasperate your children, instead bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. And if I was to try to summarize, we launched Legacy in November 22. And if I was to try to summarize what I've learned from then until now with working with fathers, and we provide programs for churches to help faith and fatherhood thrive. That's our little statement. So I've seen lots of different churches, met lots of different men. And I think it's that move, lots of fathers just have good intentions. We want to help them move to being intentional without becoming intense. And I think actually a lot of fathers are scared to move towards being intentional because they're scared of becoming intense. And And Paul is so clear, and we need to devote ourselves to the apostles' teaching as believers. So he says, don't exasperate. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. Now, I would argue that it takes a lot of intentionality to bring your children up in the training and instruction of the Lord. But we're not to take ourselves too seriously. That's it. It should not become an intensity, just an intentionality. And so it's about bringing God into your everyday life, Paul. It's about you're going to see football with your boys or you're watching the match, but at halftime you're talking to them about life. It's about, I think, topping and tailing the day with the word of God is good with your families when your families are young and as they grow up, just the opportunities that you get to speak to them. It's about belonging to a church together, and a lot will fit into place if you belong to a church together.
Mm-hmm. When we were asking you to prepare for this, one of you, and to be honest with you, I can't remember which one of you it was, but one of you came up with these sort of 3 questions that, whether it be young men, young boys, or whether it be our daughters or our granddaughters are asking. And it was, who am I? Does anyone love me? Is anyone proud of me? How can what do dads need to be doing in this current age to ensure that our sons, our daughters, our grandsons, our granddaughters actually hear from us? What do we need to put in place to make sure they get the right answers to those questions? Nate?
Well, it was actually Andy who gave you those 3 questions, but they sounded far too good to have come from me. But I think some of the things we've already been sharing, I think, as Andy says, about the context of the church, I think is essential. But this stuff, it takes intentionality, it takes time, it takes, literally writing it in the diary to say, okay, this evening, people are often thinking about marriage counseling and things like put in the date nights, put in those sorts of things. And it's very easy, I think, as a dad, to find that you are, without, having your eyes open for 5 seconds, the week, the months have already been planned out. The number of clubs and things and everything's going on. And all these timetables are just running amok within your family life. And sometimes it does just take saying, no, actually, there's a weekend coming up. And as a family, or for me with my son or my daughter or whoever else, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to try to create some opportunity to have those conversations and to have some of those experiences, which I think is exactly what Andy's sort of encouraging people to do through the legacy ministry.
Paul, can I tell you a quick story? Those questions have actually come in our youth ministry in Exodus. We have a project called Bible Reading Together. It's a tremendous project. We go into a local school. Volunteers from a local church, usually retired people, come in and they read the Bible with pupils. There's a class facilitator and then pupils round a table. And we usually read the first chapter of one of the Gospels, and then they leave with that Gospel and a little booklet to take them through the rest of it. I love it. It's not Bible teaching, it's just Bible reading. It's introductory, and you learn an immense amount by reading the Bible with first-time Bible readers. So we were in a school in the northwest of Ireland here in County Londonderry, and we were reading Mark chapter 1. And on the Wednesday of the week, we were reading it with 920 pupils through the course of the week. And on the Wednesday, one of our volunteers said, have you noticed that all the young fellas, all the young boys, are given the same answer to the last question of the class? So after we read the first chapter, we ask a couple of questions. And the last one is, what do you want to remember from the passage? Mm-hmm. And so I was volunteering, if you like. My colleague was facilitating. And so I thought, I'm going to pay attention. And so from the Wednesday to the Friday, in my little group, actually, I always had 3 or 4 pupils at my table. And actually, every time I asked the question, I got the same answer from the Wednesday through to the Friday, about 13 or 14 times in a row. It was amazing. And for clarity, we've done it with other schools since. And while it hasn't been 100%, the theme has continued that when pupils are honest, this is what they say they want to remember from Mark chapter 1. And of course, Mark chapter 1 is really varied. There's John the Baptist eating locusts and wild honey. You have a man with leprosy. You have someone possessed by a demon. You have Jesus' baptism. Jesus' first sermon, repent and believe the good news. But what they all want to remember, they point out to the verse that you mentioned. Mark chapter 1, verse 11. It's what God the Father says to his Son after he's baptized. Yeah. It says, a voice came from heaven. You are my Son, whom I love. With you I'm well pleased. Now, I'm presenting that as a genuine observation. It's not a stat from a nationwide survey, but it is a real observation from ministry that we are doing. And we see it time and time again, sometimes nervously. Sometimes they just point it out and don't realize how profound they're being. And they say, I think I want to remember that verse. So, I'm asking what's going on there. And I think there's two things going on. One is a real encouragement for organizations like yours, Nate. I think there's a evangelistic, the evangelist within us should be bubbling at this point, because in that verse is described a right relationship with heaven. Heaven itself saying, you're my child, I love you, all things are good, And of course, I'm preaching to the choir here, because of sin that's been broken and the story of redemption, Jesus, in Christ, we can come back to a relationship with God. And so I think as first-time Bible readers read that verse, something within them jumps, and they don't have the words for it, but they long for heaven to say that over them as well. And what a privilege when we get the chance to share that with the next generation. But then the other, main observation is I think we live in an under-fathered society. And so whenever young people hear of a father saying this over their son, what they're actually longing for is for those words to be said over them. And so those three questions, God says, you are my son. So he tells Jesus who he is and where he belongs. Whom I love, he expresses affection to him. With him I'm well pleased. So he tells him that he's proud of him. And at the Transfiguration, he adds on, listen to him. So he speaks into his calling. And I think any youth leader, any secondary school teacher with their head screwed on will know that those are the issues that are bubbling up to the top for young people today. They want to know who they are. They want to know if they're loved. They want to know if anyone's proud of them. And they want to know what they can contribute to the world. And many a young person's story is told in pursuit of the answer of those questions. And the gospel holds it, and fathers can share it, and we can share it today.
And if dads are prepared, Nate, to be intentional without being intense, to tell the story, to show the vulnerability, but also the strength to be that image of God in their child's life and pick up those questions, what difference can that make for those children progressing into adulthood through adolescence?
I think it gives you just an incredibly sure foundation, doesn't it? I think that's the eternal love and union between God the Father and God the Son as the dove, the Spirit comes down, is the foundation for all things. And then the expression of that within a particular family, from one father to their child, is the best start you can give someone. And just that kind of whispering, there's that great line in Romans 8 where the Spirit who testifies, cries out, Abba, Father. That there is a kind of a whispering. I remember one occasion when we lived in the States for a short while, and my son started playing baseball, Little League as it's called. And we didn't know the first thing about baseball, but there he was out on the field, and I'm watching, not really knowing what's going on, but aware that whether he's doing a good job or not. And there's one point where I think he might have been a misfield or something. He didn't quite get the ball when he was supposed to. And all I wanted to do was to just have a little earpiece and just to be able to whisper to him, it's okay, I love you, proud of you. That's all I wanted to say to him, because I could see this head had dropped, his shoulders were sort of slumped and that sort of thing. Now I should, do him the credit of saying he took some catches and, even threw someone out and later on in the game. So I don't want to downplay his baseball ability, but just that sense of wanting as a dad, just to whisper in his ear and just say, this is who you are, exactly as Andy says. You're well loved, and I'm very proud of you. And that sort of thing can really, that gives people such a great start in life. It gives people such a great start to the day to know that's who you are. So I think that sort of constant reassurance of the Father's love is desperately needed. Yeah.
Andy, for you?
I think of my own dad, and this should be an encouragement for you, Paul, and for those at UCB. The UCB word for today, that was my father's Bible reading notes, and he would do them every day at 10:30, and he would take us 10 o'clock tea at 10:30. That was his joke. And on a Saturday then, me and my sister were in the house because we would have been at school. And how did my dad pass faith on to me? He took me to church, him and my mum. And then he read the UCB notes out loud. That's what he did. On a Saturday, he just invited me and Claire into the kitchen. And he done his own, they were just the Bible reading notes he would do every day. He didn't think through resources or anything like that. And he just read them out loud. It was that simple. It wasn't intense, but he was intentional. We were in the house, so he wanted to share the story of God with us. And that's enough for me to know the story. So, I really want to encourage any dad out there, just read a verse, read a proverb at dinner time, tell your kids you love them at night, and pray. Get on your knees. Say the Lord's Prayer in the morning, and after it, pray a blessing over all of your family and lift them up to God.
It's undoubtedly the case that being a dad, being a parent, is a complex thing. Many years ago, Ishmael wrote a song. He said, "Parents, please spend time with your children. For God has put these little ones in your care. Now they may be small, but in what seems no time at all, you'll turn around and find they won't be there." They grow up so quickly. They are so influenced by the stories that are around them. It is absolutely essential. Whether it's from a faith point of view, whether it's from a character point of view, whether it's from a courage point of view, whether it's from a compassion point of view, it is essential that we, mums and dads, grannies and granddads, actually take the time to impart our experience, our story, into the lives of the next generation, to equip them with a foundation to carry them forward. And the truth is, the example of our Father who art in heaven, taking the time to tell his Son that he acknowledged him, he owned him as his own, he was pleased with him, that he loved him. That is the foundation that we build our parenting on. And in doing so, equip the next generation to bring up our grandchildren well. You've been listening to UCB Life Issues. My guests today, Andy Lamberton and Nate Morgan-Locke. You can find out more about the work they're doing by taking a look at legacyfathers.org and also speaklife.org.uk. Guys, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
And thank you as well to Rachel, my producer, for today's Life Issues. Why not join us next week for another one? Ta-da.